Michelle Ferguson here, and I'm so glad that you tuned in for today's podcast. Today, I want to read you a passage out of Luke chapter 5 and talk to you about how to elevate your life. I'm sure there are many of us who want to go to a higher level. I'm going to read most of chapter 5 here. I'm going to start with verse 1. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word, they're pressing upon Jesus, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he stood unto Simon, and he said, Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering said unto him, Master, we have toiled, or we have worked all night long, and have not taken anything. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. And when they had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, and he said, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. And he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they brought their ships to the land, they forsook all and followed him. Well, I love this passage because this passage really lays out, here we can see how Simon got his life elevated, gone to the next level. Started off as an unsuccessful fisherman of fish and ended up a Jesus called out and inspired fisher of men. Now, I want to point something out to you is that at the very beginning of this, Jesus has a need. He's here. We know what his mission was here. His mission was to give the good news, to spread the good news of the gospel. He gets to a place where there's too many people and he sees two ships. And he comes and he asks Simon Peter to use his ship. The first step that you need to do in order to elevate your life is to let God use whatever it is that you have. Sometimes when we think about God, we only think of, oh, Lord, I want to see this spectacular thing, or I want to see, this turn into this or that turn into this. And we forget that we are spectacular right where we are. You could arguably say that Jesus, the Son of God, who is here delivering a timeless message that's going to save mankind, could find a better pulpit than a smelly old fishing boat. But that's where a lot of us makes our mistakes. The Bible talks about despise not small beginnings. Don't think of what it is that you're doing as unimportant. God can use any and everything that you have. So Simon allowed Jesus to use what he had, his boat. That was seed that he was sowing right there. And the Bible says anytime you sow a seed given time will produce a harvest. Well, Simon Peter's seed didn't take long to turn into a harvest, because after Jesus got finished using what he had, he didn't just get off the boat and say, thanks, appreciate it. He turned around and gave Simon Peter an opportunity to be blessed when he said, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught. So when you let God use what you have, God is always, you can't outdo God's giving. God is always going to bring back to you more and far above what you gave to him. But Simon's response was like a lot of our responses, because when Jesus was just on his boat to preach from his boat, Simon's like, okay, yeah, you can have my boat, whatever you want to do, that's fine, no big deal. But now Jesus is stepping into Simon Peter's expertise by trying to tell him how to fish. And I want to say this to that person where, you obey God on some issues, but you've got the things that you consider yourself to be good at. So you're not going to let God in on those things. Hey, listen, the only way to have an elevated life is to even let God in on your expertise. Notice Simon Peter here, he's like, okay, so you want me to just launch out, drop the nets with an S, But he goes on he doesn't say, okay, whatever you say. He tries to educate Jesus. Now, wait a minute. We have toiled all night and we didn't catch anything. I know what I'm doing. I'm a fisherman. It's not just, it may look that simple to you to just drop some nets, but it's not that simple. We've done this at night. And the interesting thing is, too, arguably with a net, you don't want to put down a net in the daytime at all. The fish can see that. But he decides to half obey God and only let down one net. This will show you here just how good God is. Because if I was God, I would have let him catch nothing. Because I'd have been like, I said let down the nets. I didn't ask you for all that back talk. I didn't ask you for your explanation or your expertise. And so you think you're going to half obey me? I would have just been like, you're not going to catch anything because I said let down the nets. How many of you are glad that I'm not God? I'm glad that I'm not God. But here's the other thing that you need to learn in order to elevate your life, that God is a God of mercy and grace. I'm not giving you permission to disobey God, but what I am pointing out to you is that you don't have to be perfect to see God move in your life. And for some of us, that's the hang up. Whenever God is trying to do things in your life, you stop it yourself because everything comes to your mind of all the things that you should be doing better. Notice here that God even went past his partial disobedience to bless him. So they let down the net, and of course, it broke their net because what they were bringing in was just so much more. Now, let's talk about an elevated life. Here's a fisherman who, before Jesus shows up on his boat, he couldn't even catch a fish. And now his boat is full, but it was so full that he had to beckon to his partners to come over and share in the load. I want you to notice that when God gets involved with your life, for those of you who are worriers, what about my kids? What about my friends? When God gets involved in blessing your life, when you let him into your space, the blessings that God pours out on you will affect those around you. And so the ships were full, so much so that the ships began to sink, just overwhelming, more than enough. That's just who God is. And then verse 8, Simon Peter says what a lot of us say, depart from me. I'm not worthy of all this, God. I'm a sinful man. You picked the wrong person. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but God, I'm not good enough for all of this. Again, it goes back to the mercy and grace of God. God never said to you, clean up and then come to me. He said, come to me and let me clean you up. Stop letting the excuses of your past stop you from getting to where you need to be in your future, and that's in the arms of God. So many people do the exact opposite of what they need to do when they mess up. We have a tendency to run and hide like Adam and Eve did. They messed up and they went and they hid from God. But the very thing that you need to do when you mess up is run to God. First of all, you can't hide it from him. He already knows. But he sees even past your actions to your heart and to your potential. Verse 9 again says that they were all astonished. Everybody was astonished. Everybody. And as a result of that, Jesus took the opportunity in response to Simon Peter just saying, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of you blessing me to this point. Jesus went right past that. And instead of just responding to that, he actually elevated and changed the man's life. No longer are you just going to be an ordinary fisherman. I'm calling you to be on my team. Can you imagine what kind of honor would it be to be on the ministerial staff of Jesus? God elevated his life. But even in that situation, Peter still had an opportunity to be like, that doesn't make any sense. Because, okay, Peter's a fisherman. Simon Peter's a fisherman. And now, he could really start his booming business because after all, he's the guy who Jesus performed a miracle on his ship. I mean, can't you just see the marketing campaign right now? Buy anointed fish from Peter. Why would you walk away from this? Why would God bless you in this area, but then you move on to something else? Simon Peter had a decision that we all had to make, and that is to follow Jesus even when it doesn't make sense in your mind. Recognizing that our ways are not God's ways, and our thoughts are not God's thoughts. He knows above, far above all that we can ask or that we can think. So instead of Simon Peter getting to the place where he's saying, like, I'm going to sell all these fish because me and my family are going to be set for quite some time, he recognized the opportunity to go higher. And that's what you need to do. Oftentimes, the next level for you is not going to come in a comfortable package. But trust and know that as you step out, that God's motives concerning you are always to do good for you and to never harm you. It's time for you to step out and get to that next level and let God elevate your life. Hope you enjoyed the podcast today. Want to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends and family. You can find it on michelleferguson.org. I'm Michelle, and I'm helping you to discover, develop, and celebrate who God created you to be.